Okie dokie, here we go. What's up, everybody? My name is Richard Terrell, and you are watching DL Live, a daily stream in which we talk about game design. We talk about game design all day on our Discord, design-oriented Discord, but here's where I just address certain topics. And for the next few weeks or so, we're only talking about Smash because it's my favorite game series. You can find us on our YouTube channel, our Twitter's at design-oriented, and you can find our link to the Discord on the Twitter. Otherwise, you know, I don't have really anything new to add to the Smash resume here. I guess I could say that way back in the day of the first Smash tournaments in about 2003, you know, I hand drew my own Kirby jersey. Like, I drew art, Smash Brothers art, on these large puffy white hoodies for our whole crew, and that was a lot of fun. That was long before the age of esports and things like that. That's just a lot of fun. I still have my Kirby hoodie somewhere. It still fits me for whatever reason. I might find a picture of that somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Kirby hoodie. But yeah, I used to hand draw my own Kirby shirts all the time just because I like drawing, and there really wasn't a lot of that kind of thing back in the day. Kirby. But anyway, the stream's going to cover Smash topics, and today I kind of wanted to cover some preliminary stuff for understanding the metagame. Because then after we do a brief metagame topic, we can cover footsies and topics on Melee and how the metagame grows and how people learn and all that. And we can always go back to some other topics. Hey, metagame's down here as well. Metagame everywhere. But it doesn't matter. So we're gonna hit some of these topics right now, and hopefully I can find some cool pictures to back me up. But metagames are something interesting, and it's kind of funny how some people even think the word itself is pretty controversial. They think they kind of make up very broad definitions that, you know, while maybe in general in the scope of what a metagame is, it doesn't really help us understand these games better. I mean, I'm always about using language in a way that helps us actually understand things better. So, you know, if you consider metagame to be any and everything that kind of happens outside of the game itself, like the people who play it, the events that get thrown for it, the techniques that players are developing, the top players, like all that's part of the whole history of the game being played, or the metagame, or the layer on top of the actual like rules of the game. Our focus is generally talking about, you know, strategy trends and maybe top players and rule changes over time. So that's what we are most interested in. I'm gonna type in meta. Oops. So I used to think about the metagame a lot, and back in the day, I realized that nobody was talking about it very well. So right here, I wrote this article series called No, that's not it. Metagame Meditations. Right here is 4 parts, and in it I started this project in which, you know, first I talked about what a metagame is and defined it. Then I talked about, what did I talk about? How certain things in a metagame come in trends, right? And it's not necessarily about the rules that are embedded in the game itself, but you can track things over time, and that really has to do with how people learn and what they're focusing on and who they're copying and what they're inspired by. So it's not easy to predict metagames. Like, that's another big factor. Like, nobody can sit down and be like, first people are going to get really used to L canceling, and then they're going to get really used to wave dashing, then they're going to get used to nobody knows. It's thousands of players moving in all these different directions, and it's really quite crazy, right? So I also mentioned that a metagame is like a collective history of what's happening in a game, and for a fighting game, you know, the old adage goes, if it works, it was the right move, right? Which is to say that no matter how good you think you are, or how solid your strategy is, if it doesn't work on your opponent, and your opponent like counters it because they know you're going to do it, then it wasn't the right choice, right? And fighting games are designed to be they're made in a way to where if you're too predictable, like all the time, then you're probably going to lose, because there are relatively easy counters that people can do if they know exactly what you're going to do. So with that said, this kind of talks about concepts of, well, if we're all keeping track of this history and changing over time, sometimes there's this concept of keeping people honest. And like, instead of assuming that your opponents are at a current level of the metagame, you're like, wait a minute, like the only reason we do this is because other people did that. But then like, I'm gonna have to test you to see if you even know what that is. If you don't know what that is, then why bother doing like the step that's supposed to anticipate it? You're not doing it, right? In a sense, like, you may look like you're this good, but maybe your history, the knowledge that got us to this point, maybe you don't know all of it, right? And that's why people test each other all the time with certain strategies and techniques and approaches. So in a lot of ways, you can see strategies in a metagame with long-running players kind of like represent the highest level stuff, but also downgrade or downshift to like previous metagame stuff, because they are trying to be less and less predictable and do the thing that their opponent doesn't know they're going to do. So metagames, as exhibited through gameplay, are pretty complex, and it takes quite an accurate eye and a history of knowledge to understand, where in the history they're going. But you can just enjoy the game, and you can even see patterns just for what they are in the middle of the match. So this is just a little chart example that I drew of illustrating like how you might document a metagame, with dominant strategies being these large letters and these tiny strategies and counters being developed in response to the large letters, and then how different communities can branch off and like, oh, this community developed C in response to B, while this community developed E, but then they developed C1 and they still use a little bit of B2, which came from this B area. Maybe I'll just draw this. Wait, I don't think you guys can see my draw on the screen, can you? Yeah, you can. Cool. So maybe, so this C was developed on C, but this B goes back to this B error here, and then maybe they develop a second C2 that's directly in response to this tiny B that brought over here. So people constantly like seeing things that are happening and responding to it, and then maybe a whole new era of techniques comes out where they have D, and then for some reason A gets brought back. Like maybe A was like, nobody's doing A for this whole chunk, right? But then all of a sudden like A is popular again, and then we developed, we took B1 from this, and now the current meta is like D, we call it D, but it includes D1, A1, and B1. And like, what if this whole community over here is like, well, we developed E to deal with B, and E, we only like C1. And like, oh, they developed C1 too. Or maybe they looked at the people doing C1 stuff and like, oh, we're just going to do that, but they're definitely in an E era. Like, it's as complicated as history is. And I think it's important to note that trends can split, strategies can pop up again. Whole trends can go back to where they started, right? This is a little less likely, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but it is possible for like, okay, well now everyone's doing that thing again, but maybe when they go back to A, they got a little bit of a F1, D1, E1, C2, but they're still predominantly in this A philosophy, but they've learned so much from all these other branches that now, they can play better. So whatever that means for different games, it gets a little crazy, but this is a basic notation system that I created for keeping track of these trends. And yeah, just talk more about metagames. So I can link the article in the description, but that's essentially some ground level concepts that I wanted us to know. Now how it relates to Smash is, we got a whole history of players, right? And Smash has been fortunate enough to be a long and strong enough series that, hey, I just popped the chat out again. A long and strong enough series that we've been around in 1999, which was largely before the internet was what it is today. We were before the age of social media. We've survived and embraced the age of social media. We were before the age of esports. We survived the age of esports. We're in it. We were before the age of streaming. We survived. We were before people could even host videos of matches, and we survived because we just loved going to each other's houses. We didn't have internet play until Brawl and Wii, and even still, like, we survive. So Smash Brothers and understanding how a particular strategy or trend propagates is a really interesting case study if you want to look at all the Smashes. With 64, it's just word of mouth. With Melee, we built up the ground community from the grassroots, from the ground up, and we talked to each other using words on Smash boards. And very late in Melee did we have any kind of video sharing whatsoever. I took these freaking videos around to tournaments and popped the GameCube cables into a VCR and then hit record on the VCR at tournaments at multiple stations so I could actually get footage of people actually playing games so we could have it for history. And I have a video of that online if you didn't know. Let me just pull that up. YouTube called yeah, so like I used to be a historian or whatever of sorts for a lot of Smash. I have pictures of tournaments thrown well before they were as cool as they are now, and I hosted tournaments for a year, bi-weekly tournaments. That's one every 2 weeks. And
everybody, this is the Crazy Kirby Kid.
And I have this, yeah, this is me talking in this quick history of the Melee metagame localized around Texas tournaments, because that's where I live. And so footage goes all the way back with Akon 22 to 2002, 22. That's a weird way of saying that. Where we played with free-for-all and items, because, you know, any tournament you go to, we weren't that picky, and you know, that's obviously, if you see a Kirby, it's obviously me. No one else played Kirby even back then. But it was fun. A free-for-all with items tournament. And then, you know, then we finally got our 1v1 rule set. Most from 2001. Playing, like, the strongest players from San Antonio. It just, over the years, getting strong. I don't even know what the latest year is. Man. And obviously I'm recording these footage off of TV cameras, right? Like not even direct feed of our non-HD games. So, you know, that's just the brief little look of Smash. So I've been doing this kind of thing for a long time. And interviewing players for a long time. And collecting data for a long time. And thinking about this for a long time. So this is a lot of what I've researched. Is just quick and hitting the highlights. So the metagame, so with Smash, with fighting games in particular, you know, they say that the game doesn't get good until there's a lot of players. Like, what does that mean? Or like, you can't play a fighting game against a CPU. Like, what does that mean too? Or, what's another one? Yeah, you only, the best move is only the one that works against your opponent. Well, for all these reasons, these are really cool ways to understand what a fighting game is and why we like it so much. A fighting game only works if there's a lot of players. Like, why do you need a lot of players? You technically don't. You just need 2 players, right? But the idea is that if everyone is constantly looking in different directions and playing characters in different directions and practicing matchups in different directions, then they pull it all together, and then we only take what's coolest or what works the best and we move in that direction. The community overall is helping the game push deeper and deeper. Because if we look at people playing Smash 64 and even Melee in the early days, the lack of communication between all of us really held us back. People played Smash 64 and didn't even know there was a role, right? One of the primary defensive options, because they never held shield and hit left and right. Crazy. You think that would ever get away, anybody would ever get away with that currently in Smash? No, never. And the information that they share is just super significant in where the tournament scene goes and the things that people discover and the things that people rage at, right? Trends come and go, and it's all based on what people do. So you need people. You can't play a fighting game against a computer because these games are designed around double blind and kind of being on the bleeding, cutting edge of reactions and not reactions, and trying to get in your opponent's head and making sure that you play in a way that you can sort of snowball your offensive capabilities because you sort of get them off balance and they're constantly trying to catch up mentally. Like, that's all the cool part about playing sort of a real-time strategy game. I use that term loosely, but it's a real-time game that's also a strategy game, not like a StarCraft. And that's why you can't really play this game with the computer. So we need each other. We have each other. And because of fighting games and the response time and the technology, like a lot of times we have to just travel to each other's physical locations just to practice, just to compete. And that means a lot for us. So the metagame is a history of the people. The things that people complain about are probably because top level players complain about it, and sometimes they're justified, sometimes they have good points, and sometimes they just don't. Sometimes they're wrong, and that's just what it's like being a person. Like, nobody can get it right 100% of the time, no matter how hard they try. So a lot of our trends in the game were just based on preferences, and preferences are expressed a lot of times through complaints, and complaints are resolved a lot of times through rule changes if the people are popular enough, and that's just kind of how it goes. So the trends that you see in a metagame are also, like I said before, there's no way to predict it, but there's also no way to basically, I don't know, ensure that people play a certain way or learn about something or think about something a certain way. Sure, tutorials, teaching, training mode, challenges, all that, they go a long way. Smash doesn't have a lot of that, and Smash is really complicated anyway. So, like we saw with perfect shielding, people didn't do it in Brawl. I don't even know if they knew how it worked. People don't really do it in Smash 4. They kind of do it, like a couple of really dedicated players and look like they know what they're doing and setting up traps, but the other ones don't. And they don't even talk about it. And they don't even go like, it's a thing, I heard about it, but I don't want to practice. Like, it's just like they don't know about it. So it's crazy. And not even tech like that. Like, some players don't even know the basic counters for how other characters play. And I wish I had two players. I'd demonstrate some stuff with Duck Hunt Dog and Sonic that'll just make you laugh. I don't really think Sonic's spinball approach is that solid. There's like an optimized way to counter almost everything he does, which means that one of his primary approach and damage and combo racking up tools would be completely sort of nullified. Now, I've done it, and it seems to work in theory. I'd like some more top players to do it against top Sonics. There's only so much I can do, but essentially, if that were the case, isn't that crazy? Like, I could teach someone how to win all their Sonic matchups or greatly turn the tide in their favor, just with a short session or an article or a few words. But knowledge is power, and learning is difficult, and the more you learn, the harder it is to learn other kinds of things, and learning has its own stickiness and its own momentum, and for all these reasons... Wow, I don't need you streaming. For all these reasons, understanding the metagame and why players do X and why they don't do Y, super complicated. But the only thing that you really need to focus on is like, where am I going to fight next? Who am I going to fight? And what do I need to do to get better? Like, that's really all everyone ever does. So that's good. What did I want to say more about metagame? Let's go back to the list. So we talked a little bit about... Oh, let's talk about language and terms. So that's another good one to touch on. So, we'll look at that later. Beep. So, the metagame is the history of a lot of the things that the players know and do, but it also includes how they talk about it. Because, like I said before, in Smash 64, we didn't really talk a lot, and then Melee we had Smash boards, and then from there social media we had sites like Olive's Brawl and Smash boards, and then Smash 4 we had Twitter, Reddit, and everything's crazy, right? Discords, Facebook groups. How you talk about it means a big deal. Like, even having the language say forward air or fair, dare, bear, like that's power. Like, it actually helps you think about the game better. The famous Isaiah quote, "Don't get hit," is a beautifully Eastern style, like, cryptic philosophy that you might hear from your martial arts master that you're supposed to mull on and chew on forever until you realize, like, oh, everything that I do in this game needs to be evaluated in terms of me not getting hit for it. And once I do that and I do it well, I could probably recognize opportunities where my opponent can be hit, and if I do that well enough, I'll have tons of advantages damage-wise, and the win should be fairly easy to secure after that. that is what the philosophy of don't get hit is when you tease it out. So, language is important. And, with the Tech of the Week and what we did with One Smash, we tried to give people the language to understand the game better. But unfortunately, a lot of how people learn is just, as you might expect, especially for a video game, it's very casual. It's very winging it. So, in the fighting game community, there's terms for things like frame traps. And what that really means is there is an attack string of at least 2 hits where it's not a true string. So there's a gap in between the 2 hits. And what you do is try to control this gap to where it's only big enough for your opponent to try to do something, but then the next hit will hit them if they try. So if you're like punching their shield and you kind of delay the punch, they may be like, now it's time to shield grab and smash, and then that second punch will hit them because you delayed it, because you gave them a gap to sort of think they could get through, and you punch them for it. There's other kinds of frame traps they can do, just like two attacks, or even if they're in hit stun, you can put a gap in the follow-up hit to try to like stuff to make them jump out of it, but then they still get hit and they essentially lose a jump. Like, that's a frame trap. A frame trap is not when a character air dodges and you cover the results. That's not a frame trap. That's just called covering the results. It's called playing the game. If no matter how the character moves on the stage, if you just move in to cover it or anticipate it and try to lock out the possibilities, it's not a frame trap. Air dodging and catching that is not a frame trap. It's a very simple concept. And then some commentator said it, some other person just heard it and kind of inferred or made up the reason, and now the whole community is just like using the wrong term. And on some level, it's not that big of a deal. Ooh, they say this is this and they say that is that, but within their community, they know what they mean. It's not a big deal until you're trying to explain to people how frames work and trying to give them a sharper idea about how the game works, and you need this language to work together instead of against each other. And if you're saying all these things about frames, like, yeah, and that leads to a frame trap, you're like, no, that's not. And you heard the word frame, which makes sense in one context, and then you just thought it should make sense, and it should, but you learned the wrong term. There's a lot of little terms like that irk me, frame trap being one of them. And they just don't want to say, like, ooh, good coverage, or he covered both options, or anything like that. And the way people used to use option select was just sad. I know option selects are kind of a radical concept, nothing too simple about explaining that one, but come on. Google it. Do a basic Google search first. No? Alright. So it's always a battle of understanding, right? Even if you kind of move away from the language angle and say, hey, I'm going to show you this. Conceptually, words are some of the best ways to communicate concepts. And you can show somebody something all day, but they may never get it. Like, you need as many different sort of ways to get at that concept as possible. Showing helps, explaining it helps. Like, you probably need both, and you probably need some clear language to do it. But hey, hey, there's a lot of complex reasons why the metagames of these video games are so hard to predict, and some of it is stuff like that, like a mistaken definition, a slip of the tongue, a wrongly learned something, and all of a sudden you got a whole alternative branch in history where Sakurai made Smash Brothers for the Xbox and all the characters are different and we play with motion controls. So, be careful what you wish for, whatever that means. Okay. In another sense, that kind of makes Smash impossible to teach. This has to do more with learning theory and why it's hard to learn, and how if you don't use tools to externalize your thoughts, like writing things down, which includes language or something like that, then you're going to have all your thoughts be like this mushy feeling in your head, and editing those mushy feelings and pruning them and steering and shaping them is so hard once you get too many of them in your head. And that's why a lot of people say they play by feel, but it's also a lot of the reasons why they get frustrated. They are fighting themselves essentially in that, and there's no easy answer to how to address this problem. Teaching is hard. It always will be. So it's not just a matter of like, I have all the answers, why don't people listen to me? It's just so much more complicated than that. So that's why it's kind of exciting to see metagames develop. Like, it's just as wild and as chaotic as you might expect, and that's kind of a neat little reflection on life itself. All these people bouncing off of each other. Cool, that's a good stopping place. So talked a little bit about metagame. Obviously, you can go on YouTube and watch any Smash video you want. It'd be cool to take a look at multiple Smash matchups over time for Smash 4 or Melee or whatever. What I will say is there are trends in the metagame, and whole styles and whole characters come and go. People didn't think Jigglypuff was good in Melee, and if you know anything about Melee now, you think like, ha, really? You're like, well, Jigglypuff wasn't good until Jigglypuff was good. All the potential was there because obviously Melee didn't change, but again, like I said, it's the people that make the game, and that's kind of a crazy little mix equation if you want to think about it. But yeah, trends come and go, and some people are like, oh, Melee's so fast, like so fast and fluid. Like, there's a time when Melee had like all this crazy wave dashing and L canceling and combos, and then the combos went away. Like, why? It's because people learned how to DI better and set themselves up in a way to where they avoided the combo starter, which made it hard to get the combo follow-ups. And there was a time when Mewtwo King, like 6 years ago, was really slowing down the game with his Sheik and taking characters like Captain Falcon and just kind of chain grabbing him and just slowly working him over. Like, that was a thing. That was a time. So not everything was fast. Fast usually comes when... So, like, metagames always sort of teeter-totter and pendulum swings back and forth between people discovering new offense, and then the defense catches up, and then defense is strong. But then people have to then learn new offense, so it slowly swings back over. Then people learn defense, and it slowly swings back. So sometimes it feels like everything's aggressive, and people are just going crazy and just going in there and getting success. And sometimes it feels like run-up shield is too powerful, wave dash back is too powerful, ledge gapping is too powerful. Like, sometimes it is. And you got to fight through it. I think that's one of the things a lot of people don't understand about a fighting game. Yeah, it sucks now, but the reason why it sucks is probably because of the mentality you put yourself in. Really less to do with like the limitations of the balance of the game. For Smash 4's case, you know, Melee, those lower characters can't do anything. But Smash 4 is a much better balanced game, so we're thinking about that in those terms. Like, if you pick a somewhat viable character, it's usually your mind that can't keep up and not anything to do with the character. Because you can get top players to play those lower characters and beat you the same, right? There's something you're not doing right or thinking right, and that's usually the source. Oh, Smash Bros. Is making noise. The source of your problems. So, it's complicated. No one can ever say like a fighting game is this. Like, oh, Street Fighter V is so slow. All new games will start out slow. Because think about it. If the pendulum swings back and forth between defense and offense, it's a simple illustration. When you first start off a game, you're probably not going to have enough knowledge to do defense or offense. And because defense in games is usually much easier than offense, like this is almost a universal quality. Like holding back or down in Street Fighter is easier than doing all those combos input-wise. Holding shield and rolling around in Smash is easier than comboing and edge guarding and all that. In Mario Striker's Charge, the goalie is automatic. So defense is automatic and offense you have to work for. Usually it's easy to do defense, but it's at a strategic disadvantage, and the fun part is doing offense, so you're going to work at it. Like, that's how a lot of games are balanced. So that means when a game first comes out, it's going to start in the defensive side. Or the defensive side is going to quickly be prominent, and you're going to have to figure out how to get around that. And the precision that you need to play at a high level, and the amount that amount of information your strategies need to take into account to be effective, that takes time. There's no magic speeding bullet for that. Like, it's gonna take time. You always have to give games that look kind of flat and boring and samey at the beginning time to really bloom, right? So that's what the players are there for. They're there to play because they like it. And if you don't like it as a spectator, feel free to just stop watching. I stopped watching Dragon Ball FighterZ because it was boring. I don't really like that style of fighting game that much. It seems a lot less diverse than Marvel vs. Capcom with all these different characters and moves. And it just seems like Dragon Ball Z is kind of bankrupt for ideas when it comes to like beam attacks and combos, like so whatever. But that doesn't mean that it's always going to stay that way. Like the players could really make every character look, feel, play differently, and that's something that I hope they do. Like, and it would make watching these matches more interesting. Same with all games. It's the same with Smash in particular. No one's gonna come out of the box and be like, "Oh, this game's so great." Like, you're gonna start with the basics. You're gonna build on that and work it up. Games can't be esports out of the box. I'm not sure how other games do it, but fighting games in particular cannot do that. Like, again, more so than other genres, it depends so much on the players both developing the ideas, putting it out there and sharing it, and then bouncing it off of each other. While other games may be sort of more of a quote-unquote linear race, like racing games, you got the track, you better yourself understanding that track, you will do better in competition, and then you can worry about, all the other sort of interactions when multiple cars are on the track. But you're constantly got your target in sight when you play a racing game. Go to time trials in Mario Kart and work those tracks. Like, that is your primary way of getting better. Smash Brothers, like, what do you work? Computer AI sucks. Maybe if you have a live person to play, you can play them, but that's one person. There's thousands and thousands of players, each that could be playing a different style, a different character, a different matchup, a different anything. Like, who knows? So, trends will come and go. It's important not to get too salty or too upset or try to condemn the game. It's important also to remember what the game is over time instead of just saying Melee is all this, it's so fast. And you're like, there's a lot of times when Melee was like Ice Climber wobbling, Jigglypuff camping, Fox reverse laser camping, not comboing, like frustrating, boring. Like, these games are complicated and they're gonna have some ups and downs. So that's mainly what I wanted to say about metagames. If you have any questions, let me know. But I'll be rolling in with more of these Smash videos. Going to try to knock out some more topics. A lot of topics this week. But look, we've gone through a lot. And we'll continue to go through more because Smash is a big deal. And talking about them from a really clear design perspective is something I feel like I'm the only one doing. So if you enjoy these, leave a like or something. Let me know. But otherwise, peace.